Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Hot Topics, the Don Lemon Show, 10 a.m. Eastern time, right here on the East Coast. So thank you for joining us wherever you're joining us from around the country, around the world. Let us know. Also, hit the like, hit the thumbs up. It does affect the algorithm, and more people become aware of our conversation and our channel. And that's very important, especially the conversation we're about to have this morning. Because you guys see someone on the thumbnail that I don't really like to talk about because they love attention. They love it. And so, but you know, sometimes you gotta do your thing. So I want to talk about, we talked about the liars of MAGA. Initially, when I wanted to talk about this, it was in relationship to the shutdown and the lies that the right, excuse me, the MAGA folks, politicians and pundits are telling about the shutdown, that they're saying it's about transgender people in sports, and it is about giving Cadillac insurance, health insurance to undocumented immigrants, none of which is true. Okay. And then I saw this. You guys ready? This is our friend Megyn Kelly. And I just said, you know what? We got to talk about this. And first off, I'm going to bring in an analyst and an expert, and that is Tim Wise. Tim Wise is a friend of the show, and Tim Wise is a very knowledgeable man. He is an author and activist, critical race theorist, and a senior fellow at the African American Policy Forum. Tim, I know you saw this segment, and you got some things to say about it. We're going to watch the beginning of it, part of it. Sorry to do this to you guys, and then we'll talk. Here's Megyn Kelly and Glenn Greenwald.
Joy Reid, who's out there saying Joy Reid type crazy stuff, but it's becoming like a theme amongst lunatics on the left. She's saying it. Don Lemon said something similar the other day. Maybe we'll start with him, and then we'll play what Joy Reid just said. But they need a serious reality check. Here he is.
So my question this morning is, white men, are you okay? Are you okay? You're sending troops, National Guard to cities. You keep talking about, oh my gosh, Chicago and black on black crime, because this country keeps waking up to bodies in the pews, blood on the floor, every single time. The face behind the trigger looks nearly the same. These shooters again and again and again and again look just like their base. We hear about anything but the culture of grievance and violence that the right has been feeding for decades. Something is cracked deep inside when so many of you believe the answer to fear, to loss, to change is violence. Okay, pause. Are you listening to me? Pause. Okay, first of all, Tim, we can go on. But they chop that up in a way that, we're talking about political violence, right? And then giving some of the circumstances of what's happening around the country right now. Yeah. And then they chop it up. But let's just hear what Megyn Kelly has to say, because Megyn Kelly is obviously not a serious person. But go on. I hope I'm saying it loud enough for the people in the back.
Okay. So it's white men who he says are the problem in America. That'll be news to his husband, who happens to be a white man. And Don Lemon thinks that the white community needs to look at itself because we're producing the killers. We're a violent community. Just FYI, the National Institute of Justice in 2022 did an analysis of the latest 172 mass shootings, showed that they were 52% white, 20.9% black, 8.1% Latino, and 6.4% Asian. Okay, so whites made up the majority 52%, and blacks had 20% of the mass
Tim,
shootings.
I want you to get in
even
here
though
because you see where she's going with this. And by the way, I don't know what it has to do with my husband, but we'll talk about that. I have a few words for her and Glenn Greenwald about having a white husband and psychoanalyzing people. But go on.
She was just being catty because Glenn was in the room. She thought he would think that was funny. But you know, Megyn Kelly, let's just remember who this is. This is someone who insisted to her audience when she had a show on Fox that Santa and Jesus just were white. I mean, that's who this person is. So I'm not really sure that we ought to take much of what she says seriously, but also the important point here is she's missing the point of what your argument was. And her larger argument about, you know, who's responsible for violence is which we haven't played yet, but I'm sure we will, was inaccurate. First off, there are a bunch of different mass shooting databases, and they define mass shooting differently. Some of them do include what we would consider gang violence or sort of retail violence between people that are angry at one another. Others don't. They look at them more as like random public mass shootings where someone goes to the Walmart, goes to the mall, goes into a church. It could be ideological. It could just be, you know, I just want to kill a bunch of people. When you actually divide these up, because they're not all motivated by the same thing, when you look at the random kind of mass violence that I think most Americans, white, black, or otherwise, are scared of when they go to the mall, when they go out to eat on a dock in North Carolina, like the other day, when they go to church, the overwhelming percentage of those are committed by white men. It doesn't mean that they all are. Yeah, there are mass shootings that are done by black folks and brown folks, but proportionately, when you look at ideological violence, violence that is motivated by some political ideology or grievance, and it's not like black folks don't have political ideology and grievance, or Latino folks don't, but those kinds of violent acts are not being done by people of color. Black folks are not going into white churches and murdering parishioners. Latino folks are not going into synagogues and murdering Jews, right? That's not what's happening. Folks are not going to a Walmart out in rural Nebraska and killing a bunch of white people the way that Patrick Crusius went into that Walmart in El Paso or whatever it was several years ago and killed a bunch of Latinos because he thought they were all undocumented and he believed in the great replacement theory. So we have to understand that this it's not that it's the only kind of violence, and you never said it was. You never said the only violent crime in America is white. We understand because we talk about black violence all the time. Politicians talk about it. Megyn Kelly talks about it.
That's my point.
They always talk about it. And should we address it and discuss it? Sure. And
yes.
You know what? Sociologists have theories to explain that. We know from research going back decades in over 30 countries that the reason there is a disproportionate rate of regular retail street violence in the black community is because of a range of socioeconomic factors that are disproportionately affecting that community. That explains that, but we don't even have a theory for why white folks go off and do some of the crazy stuff that they do. Now, why is that? You would think we'd want to have a sociological theory. It can't just be random. It can't just be, oh, it's another random act when there's dozens of them, sometimes clustering one after the other. So what is the sociological theory to explain this subset of violence? And Megyn Kelly doesn't want to talk about that. I'm more than willing to discuss the other issue of you know, who's really committing the most violence and who's most dangerous. But why doesn't she want to talk about this as a subset of that? That's what I'm confused by.
Well, that's my point. Apparently, Megyn Kelly has some comprehension issues because we were clearly talking about political violence. And the only time that she or someone who is disingenuous like Glenn Greenwald bring it up is to knock down the fact of who is responsible for most of the political violence in this country, who is responsible for most of the domestic terror in this country, which is, according to the FBI and every single statistician, everyone, it is white men who are radicalized to the right. And so what is so hard for people to comprehend and understand and hear? Why can't they hear that and discuss that without saying, I know this is a very simple analogy, but I say, we're talking about cancer right now. And someone says, no, I want to talk about, well, what about AIDS? It's like, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the issue of political violence in this country and the people who pick up guns, as you say, go into black churches and shoot black church members. We're talking about people who go and random shootings on a pier. We're talking about people who have a make liberals cry again Trump t-shirt on. And then the guy in North Carolina saying that he was upset because of they said he was a straight man and he had some issue with the LGBTQ agenda. So
Right.
let's talk about this. But then on the other side of it, though, Tim, people will admit that men have an issue in this country. Young men and young white men, they feel disaffected or whatever. And perhaps maybe because they're not getting the right information and they're listening to people like Megyn Kelly and Glenn Greenwald and Benny Johnson and all of those. And at one time, Charlie Kirk, they're getting misinformation. They're being fed lines of bullshit.
Right. Right. Well, for example, I mean, Charlie Kirk infamously said black people go around prowling looking for white people to attack. But the reality is that white folks are about, depending on which year you look at, anywhere between 4 and 5 times more likely to be victimized by another white person than by a black person. So all the fear that he was trying to generate and that others try to generate really doesn't comport with the statistics. Are there more crimes committed by black people against white people, like just regular street crime, than reverse? Yeah, there are more of those. But you know what? There's also 5 times more white people in the population for any given black offender to go and victimize. So if I'm going to
let's dig a little deeper on that, because I just want to play the soundbite and then you can talk about the things that you're talking about. Now, she says blacks commit over 60% of the violent crime.
That's not right. That's not right.
Blacks commit over 60% of the violent crime in America, despite the fact that they're only 13% of the population. And by the way, it's not really black women who are doing it. It's mostly black men who are cut that in half. 6.5% of the population commit over 60% of the violent crime in America. That's what's true. There are all sorts of reasons for it that the left won't be honest about. But yeah, fatherless homes is a big piece of it, and gang violence is a big piece of it.
Yeah, that's wrong. That's wrong. First of all, there are two sets of crime data in this country that we normally rely on. One is the FBI's uniform crime reports. The other is the Department of Justice National Crime Victimization Survey data. The latter is the bigger data set because it includes crimes that were never reported to the police, but which victims recount when they do this survey every year. And if you look at that, which is the biggest overall number of violent crimes committed in this country, black folks do not commit 60%. They commit about 26 to 28% in a given year. And I've looked at 25 years of that data. It is always the same, between 26 and 28%. Now, is that disproportionate to the 12 to 13% of the black population? Yes, for reasons I already said. There's a disproportionate rate of offending because of the socioeconomic factors that are correlated with criminal offending, not just for black folks, but all around the world in every country that studies it. But it's not 60%. It's 28, which means the other 72% is being done not by black people. So why are white folks so scared of black people? Because that's not who the most common offenders are. Is there a disproportion in homicide? Yes. And in fact, the data does show that black folks, mostly black men, commit about half of all the homicides in America. And that seems like a really scary number. And I understand it is disproportionate. Again, that is because of the same socioeconomic factors. It's been studied by actual criminologists, none of whom are named Glenn Greenwald, none of whom are named Megyn Kelly, none of whom are named Benny Johnson, and they sure as shit were not named Charlie Kirk. They understand the reasons for that disproportion. But let me remind you, homicide is a very small, thankfully, subset of crime. So in an average year, there's about 8,000 black folks who will commit a homicide, mostly black men. And in a given year, there's about 17.5 million black men over the age of 12, which is the cutoff for being considered in crime data in this country. Do the math. 8,000 murderers out of 17.5 million eligible people is not exactly a statistically significant group. It's 4.61% of black men will commit a homicide in a given year. If you are afraid of that, you might as well be afraid of being struck by lightning like 4 times in a row. And you definitely should go play the lottery, because the odds of that are probably considerably better than being murdered by some random black person. And that's not 8,000 murders of white people, by the way. That's 8,000 murders by black folks in a given year, the overwhelming majority of which are going to be against other black folks. So white fear of black folks, based on the data that she's offering, doesn't make any sense. But let's remember, this is the same woman who on Fox spent 3.5 hours over 3 weeks back in 2009 hyping the new Black Panther Party intimidating white voters in the Philadelphia precinct. And then when that was investigated by the Civil Rights Commission, Abigail Thernstrom, who was a conservative scholar and the vice chair of that commission, said it was much ado about nothing. and it was based on innuendo and unsubstantiated arguments. So this is the kind of person we're dealing with, someone who, number one, simply lies about the 60% number. It's just not accurate. Number two, hypes the black homicide, even though it's a very small number every single year, percentage-wise, and generally and clearly cannot handle the political violence argument that you were trying to make and that she thought she was so cleverly rebutting.
I also think that it is important to point out in this conversation, which we're going to talk about a little bit more. When you talk about crime rates among Black people, you have to look at the underreporting of crimes. You have to look at the political influence of crimes. You have to look at the over-policing. You have to look at the discrimination built into the criminal justice system in this country. There are so many factors that they're not looking at as to what happens and why people commit crimes and why the numbers are the way that they are.
Well, that's the why that I use. That's the reason that I use the victimization data, because you're right. If all you do is look at the data on the crimes that are reported or the people arrested, that is going to skew, because that's where the bias will be baked in. That's why I prefer the victimization survey data, because that isn't based on what police do and don't do. It's not based on what is reported. They do a survey every year of like 175,000 Americans, and then they can get a good enough sample size to extrapolate to the larger country how many people were assaulted, how many people were the victims of robbery, and then they ask people, like, what was the racial identity is one of the questions of the offender. If you know, sometimes people don't know. There's a big chunk that says unknown or we couldn't tell. But it is true, yes, there's a disproportion, but it's lower in that category because the bias is playing out in the FBI data based on arrest, right? The arrest numbers are going to be based on where your police are going to be, who you're going to investigate. The victimization data doesn't quite have that same problem, so that can help solve for that problem, but it still does not justify the level of fear that these folks on the right are trying to perpetrate, because the data very clearly shows that only about 26% to 28% in a given year of all violent crime is committed by Black folks, the vast majority against other Black folks. White folks commit the clear majority of crime every year, overwhelmingly against other white folks. If we are going to be afraid of anyone as white people, which is what they want us to be on the right, clearly it should be our white neighbors, not Black folks, not brown folks, not people of color generally.
And then there's a little psychoanalysis baked into this as well. And I have a lot to say about that later. But this is Glenn Greenwald psychoanalyzing me and who I'm married to. Okay, here you go.
I can't help but notice that a lot of times, like, the people who are the worst race hustlers, like the ones who are constantly trying to be most incendiary with racial discourse, are people like Don Lemon, who's married to a white person, or people like Nicole Hannah-Jones, or like Wesley Lowery, who are, have a white parent, who aren't 100% Black. A lot of it is like an identity crisis. And so they're constantly trying to overcompensate by saying, I'm a Black person, our problems are white people.
We don't have enough time to psychoanalyze Glenn Greenwald. We could do it, and it would be fun. It would be very fun. I'd love to psychoanalyze a guy who used to be a big civil libertarian and very progressive, and then suddenly decided that he hated liberals more than he hated MAGA, and decided that he would, he was going to move to Brazil and fight fascism there with his husband, who is now passed, and it's obviously very tragic. Moved to Brazil to fight fascism there, and leave the fascism here to those of us who weren't, lucky enough to go live in a really nice big house in Brazil, overlooking the favelas and the poor folks who we can ignore because who cares about them? We could psychoanalyze Glenn Greenwald all day long, and it would be certainly every bit as valid as whatever bullshit he's trying to spew about Black people who are trying to overcompensate for having white people in their lives or in their families. I mean, I'm going to therapy here in a couple hours. I'll ask my therapist if that makes goddamn sense. I'm fairly confident that it doesn't.
You want to stay tuned for what I have to say about Glenn Greenwald and Megyn Kelly. Real quickly, Tim, why do they do this? And why is it so? Why does it get to them so much if you say something? Because I don't watch Megyn Kelly. I don't listen. I woke up this morning to the producer saying, you were the subject of Megyn Kelly. And I was like, oh boy,
Right.
What was it? Is it? Do I even want to talk about it? But I think this is an important issue considering where we are in the country.
It pays well, right? Because it plays to the fears and the racial resentments that the right has been cultivating for decades. If it didn't work, they wouldn't spend time on it, right? They would go spend time on something else. It's the same reason they've made trans folks in sports such an issue, because they know it plays. It pushes certain buttons of fear and resentment and anxiety, right? And that's not meant as a psychoanalysis. It's a political analysis. It's a sociological fact. They know that it works. They know that if they can push those buttons of white anger toward you or toward Joy or whomever, if they can push buttons of transphobia and heterosexism, if they can push buttons of sexism and patriarchy and misogyny, then they'll do it, because that is the red meat upon which the right relies. How boring would it be for Megyn Kelly if all she had to do was get on and talk about marginal tax rates and the kinds of things that conservatives used to talk about, or deregulation? That's not fun. Nobody gets their blood pumping talking about marginal tax rates and capital gains and tariffs. That doesn't
get clicks or subscribers, or it doesn't get you sponsors.
No, right. What gets clicks is, race hustler Don Lemon, who Glenn Greenwald still can't pronounce your name, just like the guy on the street the other day can't pronounce your name. I don't know if they think that's a flex to like make fun of the pronunciation of your name. I don't know what that is. But
they think it's insulting to me. But ever since I have been a kid, because I grew up in the South, and there's a French patois there, so people would call me Don Lemon or
Right.
Don Lemon, and
Right.
so they think like that what's his name, Tucker Carlson invented that, and that's some insult to me. It's not an insult at all. But if you really want to know how to pronounce my name, and they do, I will tell you. But it's not an insult to me. I just use it as to try to get at people when they mispronounce it on purpose.
Right.
I want to play this for you, just because last thing, maybe you can analyze this for me. Here it is.
Santa Claus should not be a white man anymore. And when I saw this headline, I kind of laughed, and I said, oh, this is so ridiculous. Yet another person claiming it's racist to have a white Santa, And by the way, for all you kids watching at home, Santa just is white, but this person is just arguing that maybe we should also have a black Santa. But, Santa is what he is, and just so you know, we're just debating this because someone wrote about it, kids. Okay, I wanted to get that straight. But
Yeah, and also remember, Jesus was white too.
Yeah, she said that too. And she walked that one back, although she didn't walk back the Santa piece. First of all, number one, I think that, look, there's part of me that says, you're probably right. Santa would have to be white, because if a black man came down a chimney in millions of white people's homes every year, somebody would have shot his ass dead, especially wearing a red suit, which would mean he was a member of a particular gang. And he only works one day a year. If he were black, they'd call him lazy. We wouldn't be going to see him in the mall. You understand what I'm saying? So if Megyn Kelly wanted to be funny like that, she could have made that joke, but she's not clever. She just actually thinks that Santa's a white guy, which is odd, because Santa's actually based on the Bishop of Myra or Myra. I don't know how you pronounce it. He was Turkish. I don't think he looked like the jolly old elf that we're used to seeing every year on the Christmas card. So in fact, he wouldn't have been white by modern standards of whiteness, the person on whom it is based. It is not based on an actual person who lived at the North Pole. He was a Turk, right? He would have had olive skin in all likelihood, the person on whom, so her history's wrong, her logic is wrong, she's delusional, and she can't even make a good joke about Santa. Like, at least if you want to make the argument, be funny, tell a joke about how Santa's got to be white for the reasons that I mentioned, but not because you actually believe it. And yet she does believe it, and she believed that Jesus was white. That's why she said that. Even though we know from there are paintings in the Vatican right now of a black Madonna and child. There has always been an understanding that whoever Jesus was, he was not a white man. He didn't have the angular features and the blonde brown hair that is common in Warner Salmon's Head of Christ, which is the most common representation of Jesus, I think, going back over 100 years now since it was created. That's not what a first century Palestinian Jew would have looked like. He would have, his coloration would have been at least the coloration of Osama bin Laden, if not considerably darker. And everybody who studied it knows that. But she's bought into the white supremacist myth that the savior of the universe for Christians has to be a white guy. And the reason they have to hang on to that is if they actually had to acknowledge that the person that they view as their savior was a person of color, their entire worldview would come crashing down. Even though every anthropologist or biblical scholar would say, or just somebody who has any knowledge of that history would know that if you were that light in first century Palestine, you wouldn't have made it to 33. You'd have had third stage melanoma by the time you were 26, and you'd have been out of it. There's no way you would have survived.
Tim Wise. Have a great day.
You get me this early in the morning, and you get this version of Tim Wise. Later in the day, I'm tired. I don't have all these jokes.
You're forcing people early in the morning to have the day they deserve, and I love it. Thank you. Especially Megyn Kelly and Glenn Greenwald. Thank you very much, Tim. We'll see you soon.
All right.
Love having Tim on. Thank you. Okay, so another gentleman that we're going to have on is also a truth teller, and that is Mr. Garrison Hayes, who has talked a lot about this, written a lot about it, and studied the information that we're going to discuss now. Garrison Hayes is going to join us. Garrison, I need 2 minutes. A word from our sponsor. We're back with Garrison Hayes. Support for the Don Lemon Show comes from Ollie. You know, my dogs, Boomer, Barkley, and Gus, they run the house. Barkley thinks he's the boss. Gus is pickier than a teenager. Boomer, picky too. But Barkley will eat my shoes if I let him. Feeding them used to feel like running a diner for picky customers. And that is why I switched to Ollie. It's fresh, human-grade meals, protein-packed, and slow-cooked in 5 tasty recipes. Even Gus eats it without giving me that, you call this dinner? Look. So you take a 30-second quiz, Ollie builds a customer plan, and meals show up right to your door. The app even connects you to real health experts for screening. So since switching, my boys have shinier coats, they have more energy, and fewer, I'm not eating this, standoffs. Okay, so head to ollie.com/lemon and use the code LEMON and get 60% off of your first box. That is OLLIE.com/lemon. And you get 60% off of your first box. And with their happiness guarantee, if your pup doesn't love it, you're going to get your money back. So trust me, your dogs will thank you, maybe even give you back your spot on the couch, or in our case, in the bed as well. Ollie. This show is brought to you by Hexclad. Now, I used to cook everything in one sad old pan. Don't tell me you don't know about that. I'm sure you did too. Eggs, pasta, steak, you name it. Cleaning it was punishment. And then I found Hexclad. Changed my entire kitchen game. You remember all the soaking and all of that? I don't have to do that anymore. Hexclad is stainless steel performance with non-stick cleanup. I use a 12-inch pan the most, big enough for a stir fry or steak, light enough to flip an omelet without feeling like a workout. They are scratch resistant, even with metal utensils, dishwasher safe, oven safe to 500 degrees, toxin free, and backed by a lifetime warranty. These pans will probably outlast me. And listen, if Gordon Ramsay uses them, you know they're legit, right? So right now you can get 10% off of Hexclad at hexclad.com/lemon. That's HEXCLAD.com/lemon. It's time to retire that crusty old pan that's haunting your kitchen. Hexclad. Thank you very much to our sponsors. Hey, Garrison, how are you doing this morning?
What's up, Don? I'm good, man. It's the morning. What's up? How are you?
I'm okay. We got Tim Wise a little hot this morning. Hopefully your temperature won't rise. Did you happen to see the Megyn Kelly clip? And
I saw the clip. I saw the clip, and it felt a lot like things that we've seen and heard and responded to and debunked many, many times over already. It feels like, you know, this conversation keeps coming up. And the fixation with trying to pathologize Blackness is a real issue that I think we need to talk about.
Okay, so then I talked a little bit to Tim about this. Megyn Kelly says 60% of all violent crime blacks commit. I'll play a little bit for you just so you can watch it, and then I'll let you respond. Here it is.
Blacks commit over 60% of the violent crime in America, despite the fact that they're only 13% of the population. And by the way, it's not really black women who are doing it. It's mostly black men who are cut that in half, 6.5% of the population. Commit over 60% of the violent crime in America. That's what's true. There are all sorts of reasons for it that the left won't be honest about. But yeah, fatherless homes is a big piece of it, and gang violence is a big piece of it.
Garrison?
You know, the first thing I have to say is blacks always gets me. It always gets me when they say blacks. Anyway, okay, that's fine. That's fine. I think, you know, I learned this lesson the hard way, Don. Last year, I made a video responding to something that the late Charlie Kirk said on a Jubilee program, where I was responding to some of the crime statistics that were being thrown out there. 13% of the population, but 60% of the crime, or whatever it is. They kind of love to kind of go in that direction. And I responded to it, and I learned a really, really valuable lesson, when his army of supporters and fans started to kind of harass me over this video where they said, you're forgetting about per capita. Like, have you ever heard of per capita? And they really love to kind of go there when you start to point out that actually like by volume, white people are committing more crime. Of course, they are the larger population in this country. When you point out the fact that, yes, there is another 1350 stat they kind of conveniently leave out, which is that black people make up 13, 14, 15% of the population, but 55% of all murder exonerations. And so when organizations dig into these cases, they find that black people are often railroaded by our justice system, that there are biases in our judicial process that often fall on black people, black men specifically. When you bring all of that up, they then find other statistics and other reasons why their preconceptions about black people were true in the first place. So they say, oh, well, it's per capita, or it's this other thing, or it's your culture, or it's the fatherless homes. And what I learned, Don, was that statistics did not bring them to these conclusions, and therefore statistics can't get them out of these conclusions. It doesn't matter how much like better data we bring to them. I learned the hard way that they are going to hold on to these beliefs because those beliefs weren't based on stats in the first place. They just thought that black people were more criminal and more violent and therefore should be dismissed and thrown away. And when we talk about police brutality, we shouldn't be heard or listened to. And so I almost hesitate to respond specifically to the stats, in part because I don't think that they really matter to these people. I don't think that's actually the conversation that they're trying to have here.
Yeah, I agree. I want to play that video because I thought that you did a fantastic job on that video, and it explains to the audience what Garrison is saying. Here it is.
Black Americans are about 13 to 14% of the population.
Yes,
about half of all prisoners are black.
Exactly.
So blacks commit more crimes than whites do. They commit more murders, they commit more arsons, they commit more kidnappings. For example, blacks are 13% of the population and they commit 58% of all the murders.
Okay, let's talk about it. These are obviously racist claims, but I will respond to them as if Charlie Kirk were a reasonable person.
Black Americans are about 13 to 14% of the population.
Yes,
about half of all prisoners are black.
Wrong. Just 38% of America's prison population is black. That's according to the U.S. government. But it makes you wonder why Charlie feels the need to add an additional 12% to the black prison population. Could it be because his bigoted talking points only work if he exaggerates them? If Charlie were actually looking for the race that makes up half the prison population in the U.S., he'd look no further than white people at 57%.
Exactly.
So blacks commit more crimes than whites do.
Wrong. The word "so" is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence.
So blacks commit more crimes.
He's saying "so" as in therefore, as in one could conclude, but Charlie knows he's lying. Even if he hadn't just lied about the black prison population, Charlie is smart enough to know that correlation does not equal causation, but he's hoping that you don't know that. So he deploys the word "so" to make you think he's coming to an obvious conclusion.
So blacks
Instead, he's making an illogical racist leap. Charlie knows that we don't have usable data about who commits crimes. It's impossible to have that data since so many crimes go both unreported and or unsolved. Charlie knows that we only have data about arrests and convictions. I'll come back to that data in a moment. What's painfully obvious is that Charlie Kirk isn't interested in understanding the statistics he so carelessly misquotes. He's interested in making bad faith arguments, something that becomes even more obvious in his next point.
blacks are 13% of the population and they commit 58% of all the murders.
Wrong again, and loud this time. If Charlie were interested in honesty, he would have mentioned the other 1350 statistic. Yes, black people are about 13% of the population, but make up 53% of all criminal exonerations. In fact, black people make up 55% of all murder exonerations specifically. Black people are more likely than any other group in this country to be convicted of crimes they did not commit. And then people like you have the nerve to parade these stats around as though they prove something. The reality is that you probably know these stats, but you leave them out on purpose because to bring that stat into this conversation would make some people think. And that's the last thing a person like you wants.
Well done, Garrison.
Thank you.
And then they came after you, right?
They came after me. This video is probably one of my most viewed videos, and it's also brought in the most kind of debunk and all of that. And I think it's fine. What I was really trying to do, Don, was actually complicate the narratives that these people are so committed to complicate the way that we think about who is and is not dangerous and all of that stuff. I mean, I'm thinking about, Megyn Kelly's remarks just a few minutes ago. And I think one of the things that they kind of do so well is that they move the goalposts so often from here to there. And it's about this thing, and now it's this thing. First, we're talking about political violence, right? Like, who's committing political violence? Actually, the public religion.
That's my whole point. Thank you, Garrison. That was my point. And now, but then they want to bring in, well, what about over here?
And now we're talking about gang violence, and we're talking about, like crimes of passion, right? So like to help the audience really think about this, the Public Religion Research Institute actually released, they've been doing research on this over time, looking at who is most comfortable, who actually answers the question, should we be engaging in political violence if it helps us reach our ends? And what they found time and time again is that white Christian right-wing people are extremely comfortable with political violence. They are almost in favor in some ways with political violence. And so when you look at who's committing this political violence, organization after organization, our own federal government came to the conclusion that right-wing ideologies were predominating those that were planning and executing on political violence specifically. And yet, when these conversations are had, we end up talking about trans people. Our mutual friend Don, Joshua Doss, who's phenomenal. I know we both are big fans. He talks about the kind of distraction game that politics is all about. That it's like, hey, look over here. He communicates that so well. And I think it's important that we recognize that in these moments when we should be having a conversation about loneliness among young men specifically, when we should be talking about the ways that right-wing thinking is kind of getting to an extreme in a way that is leading to violence, we're talking about trans people. And that distraction is serious. And what we know, I had a great sit-down interview with Mayor Brandon Scott in Baltimore. What we know is that poverty is a huge driver of violence in our community specifically. I made a whole video. In fact, Don, shameless plug, I'm dropping a video on my YouTube channel today about exactly this. This conversation of black on black crime is not new. We've been talking about this for years. I brought props for you today, Don. Can I show you my props?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm gonna show you my props. I brought this thing. This is the 19 this is the August 1979 special issue of Ebony magazine, Black on Black Crime. This is an entire issue dedicated to talking about black on black crime.
What year was that? 1970?
1979.
1979.
1979. Black people have been talking about black on black crime forever. But when it's time to talk about the people who are carrying out political violence and mass shootings, the conversation suspiciously switches over to black people again, even though we know that young white men are often seen as the faces of these kinds of crimes.
Well, that's my point in all of this. That was the clear point. And I think unless you were just trying to miss it, unless you were just like, I don't want to see that, was that I see people talking about black on black crime all the time. What crimes immigrants do, right? Remember, these immigrants and they're criminals and we got to round them up and take them out. We need transgender accountability. But no one talks about the obvious, the elephant in the room, which is these white men are committing most of the political violence, the crimes of political violence in this country. They're going into, as Tim Wise said, into black spaces and killing black people or randomly, indiscriminately. Yes, there's crime in the black community, but there's crime in the white community. We're talking about political violence. And we're also talking about the number one terror threat in this country, which is domestic terror, which is committed by who? White men radicalized to the right. When I see an earnest, honest conversation on Megyn Kelly about it, Glenn Greenwald about it, or Benny Johnson or Matt Walsh or any of those people, then I'll go, okay, well, great. They're finally talking about it. But they don't, because they keep wanting to deflect and point to something other than the people who look and act like them and come from their same political ideology.
Yeah, it really, that's my big issue here. These people are trying to force feed a very specific narrative. They're not having an honest conversation. And I don't think that we're interested in solutions. In the 2-3 weeks after the tragic murder of Charlie Kirk, we have seen an incredible number of mass shootings and political violence here in this country. And when will we have the real conversation that actually America, this is America. Political violence is a central part of the American story, that we are an incredibly violent country. And we need to actually deal with that and look at it in its face and stop trying to shift the blame from here to there and deal with the core issue, which is that we are in a country that has pushed us to the extremes of individualism in a way that that will just leave you out to hang to dry and to be poor and to live in squalor if necessary, and push you to the limits of your mental capacity so that you end up doing something crazy. That's the culture that we actually live in. And there are solutions to this. And I wish we'd take those solutions seriously.
Yeah, I want to put it up. I'm not sure if they were, because I was checking on something that they put up the Matt Walsh. I think it's a tweet or something where he says, oh, this is about me. Oh, I didn't realize this was about me. Black men are an order of magnitude more violent than white men. Wow. Why do you feel the need to have to say that? Like, what? I have a great therapist. I would like to recommend you, recommend my therapist to you, Matt Walsh, who I don't really know who Matt Walsh is. I've heard about him and whatever. I don't really know. But isn't he the guy that dressed up like no, he didn't dress up as a black man. He dressed up as somebody else. And
I think a liberal, like am
a
I?
Liberal, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he took a quote, and again, like Megyn Kelly, they take the clips out of context and they take a quote out of context. Which is fine because I did say it. And so the words came out of my mouth, but black men are an order of magnitude more violent than white men. What does that say to you?
I think we have been, there's been this discussion about whether or not certain people are racists, right? And there's always, in America, there's always going to be this really big kind of debate over whether or not a person is racist and what's the definition of racism. But one of the definitions of racism, when you really drill down into it, is this idea of being segregationist or segregationism. It is kind of the belief that black people, and in this case, white people, are different species, that black men or black people are just inherently violent and inherently more or inherently inferior is really the ultimate kind of point here. And I think when I hear stuff like this, I wonder if a person like this gentleman knows that he is repeating the exact same things that a noted racist like Bull Connor or George Wallace might say. I truly wonder if they, I think we're entering a time where there's this kind of what I'm calling like a thinking man's racism, where they're able to kind of take these little snippets of data or these little conclusions that are really all undergirded by a bunch of presuppositions, right? And then they're able to make these sweeping claims. And I just wonder if they know that you're saying something so baseline, fundamentally racist, that it's hard for me to even take seriously. If you really believe that the race, that black men as a group of people who have been colored, who have different melanin, percentages, and that is the group that is more violent, orders of magnitude more violent than people with less melanin, you are that is racist. And I really wonder if they've taken time to think about this, Don.
I wonder too, because I want to play. I've played this before, but this is Christopher Wray, the former FBI director.
A huge chunk of those domestic terrorism investigations involve racially motivated, violent, extremist motivated terrorist attacks. And the majority of those, of the racially motivated, violent, extremist attacks, are fueled by some kind of white supremacy. And I would say that the most lethal activity over the last few years has been committed by those type of attackers.
So what is he saying there? And this is the FBI.
I think he is repeating what we've known for quite some time from the data, but also what we know from our lived experience. What we know is that these ideologies are motivating, like this idea of a great replacement. I mean, Don, if you thought that someone was invading your home and taking everything that you had, you might feel desperate as well. And that's what they're being told day in and day out in right-wing media, that you are being replaced, that someone is there to attack you. I thought about the shift that I saw happening in the hours immediately following Charlie Kirk's assassination or murder, was this idea that I am Charlie Kirk. The personalization of it all is designed to make people kind of think of themselves as being the person who the gun is trained on in that moment. And so what he's saying is that these white supremacist ideologies are motivating so much of this political violence. And it doesn't surprise me when I look at the way that those who are peddling this kind of ideological thought, the way that they talk about it, it doesn't surprise me that those people are then motivated to go out and commit acts of violence. But we also have to acknowledge that white supremacy is in itself violent. The history of white supremacy in this country is a violent history, and it is the predominant history. People act. They talked about in this Megyn Kelly piece that we're responding to. They talked about like, hey, like maybe there was a time when things were unfair. When did that stop? When did it end? Can you point me to the exact moment, the exact date when that stuff ended? When discrimination ended? We've passed many civil rights acts since the 1964 iteration, because we keep finding ways in which our society and our laws are unequal and people are navigating and figuring it out. And so that's the position that we find ourselves in this moment.
When that Matt Walsh clip and this whole entire thing reminds me of this, and it's another clip from you that I thought was brilliant. Here it is.
Will Black people ever be able to be self-sufficient or independent? This question is obviously racist, but I will answer it as if it was asked in good faith. First of all, before emancipation, Black people created the necessary infrastructure for their independence and self-sufficiency. In the year 1738, the first free Black town was established in Mosey, Florida, which means that there was a free Black town before there was a United States of America. The first Black-owned media company, a newspaper, was established in 1827. All of this was before emancipation. Black towns and neighborhoods saved and circulated millions of dollars within their communities, like the Greenwood District in Tulsa, Oklahoma, North Nashville in Tennessee, Sweet Auburn in Atlanta, and countless others. There is a list way too long to fit into this video. And do you know what happened to those thriving, independent, self-sufficient communities? They were attacked by white folks. They were bombed. They were raided. They were terrorized. They were demolished. These independent, self-sufficient Black communities were fine and had existed for a very long time. The real question is, will whiteness ever be able to be self-sufficient and independent without Black oppression?
Hey, he's kind of good at making videos. What's his name?
I mean, it's true if you look at the contributions of Black culture, of Black folks on the culture in America, not only in the culture, on the economy of America, on the building, on the backs of, enslaved people portion of American history. So I think we're spot on with that. And I liked how you twisted and said, hey, this is how you should be thinking about or framing this should be your thought pattern.
Yeah, there's a very real deflection game being played here. And I'm thankful, Don, that we're playing these clips and also just exposing people to the games that they're playing, and the reality distortion that they're doing.
Yeah. Garrison, you're the man.
Don,
Thank you very much. I'll see you soon. By the way, Garrison, are you still there? I met your editor in Washington, D.C. from.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
What did you think?
He's a very nice guy. He just said, hey, I love what you do. Thanks for having Garrison on. And that was it. So
good.
Yeah.
James is a good guy. And I'm glad you guys got to meet. Don, it's always an honor to be here with you, man. You're killing it. By the way, congratulations. You'll be at 1 million subscribers on YouTube before we know it. Guys, subscribe to Don Lemon right now if you're not subscribed.
Tell them again and go check out. When does your thing drop on your channel?
I'm dropping this afternoon, Black on Black crime. Really, it's about Black on Black policing. You can find me at Garrison Hayes here on YouTube, or some iteration of those two words, Garrison Hayes, on other platforms. Thank you, Don, for having me.
Thank you, Garrison. We'll see you soon. Garrison Hayes, everyone, go check him out. Go follow him. Another person that you should check out and follow is Mr. Michael Fanone, who is sitting here watching, and you've been enraged and infuriated by some of the things, and you are like, and I said, well, come on and talk about it. Michael Fanone, give me 2 minutes. Word from our sponsors. Support comes from Lean. So we have all tried those fad diets, juice cleanses. Remember that? Remember cabbage soup, the cabbage soup diet, grapefruit weeks. You lose a little and then you gain it all back with interest. That means plus more. Doctors call it weight cycling, and it can lead to diabetes, liver damage, even heart disease, heart issues, I should say. Now that's why, I like Lean. It's not an injectable. It's doctor created. It's an oral supplement. Lean helps stabilize blood sugar, curb cravings, and convert fat into energy. No gimmicks, just support alongside diet and exercise so the weight actually stays off. Now, I have noticed more energy, fewer midnight snack runs, and a steadier rhythm day to day. It has helped. So if you're ready to break the cycle, go to takelean.com and use the code LEMON for 20% off. That's TAKELEAN.com and use the code LEMON. This is how you lose it and keep it off. Lean. The Don Lemon Show is also brought to you by the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Across America, politicians are pushing religion into public schools, 10 Commandments posters, untrained chaplains, and funding private religious schools that exclude LGBTQ kids. That's not freedom, that's coercion. The Freedom from Religion Foundation is fighting back. They just won a federal injunction stopping a Texas law that forced every classroom to display the 10 Commandments. That is a win for the First Amendment. They defend separation of church and state in court, in Congress, and in classrooms. So public education stays just that, public. You can learn more at ffrf.org/school or text Don to 511-511. That's F as in freedom, F as in freedom, R religion, F again as in freedom.org/school, or text Don to 511-511. Standard text rates may apply. Don't let your rights be rewritten. Michael Fanone, why don't you like the term black on black crime?
I think it's a racist trope. Listen, my experience in 20 years in law enforcement and American criminal justice system is that it is, I won't say it's just systemically racist. That wasn't my experience. There are certainly a lot of racists in the American criminal justice system in law enforcement, but not disproportionately so. My experience was that the American criminal justice system is systemically classist, and that it adversely affects or is unfair to a portion of our population that is, at or below the poverty line. Whether it's cash bail or the fact that police departments disproportionately target poor communities. Listen, yes, in some areas, poverty creates a need for, or there's going to be more crime, often more violent crime in those communities. But the way that they are policed is what's the word I'm looking for, Don?
The way that they're policed, what, disproportionately?
Yes, it is over policing.
Over policing.
And it creates a occupation, this idea of an occupational force. It creates a relationship between the community and law enforcement that is adversarial. And unfortunately, that is systemic. And that was something that I experienced from day one out of the police academy, or even before I got out on the street, all the way up until my last day on the job.
Well, let me jump in here because I had these stats up so that I could talk about it. And I'm glad that you mentioned it. Over policing, predominantly black neighborhoods are often subjected to higher rates of police initiated contact, regardless of actual local crime rates. The focus can lead to a higher number of arrests for minor offenses in these communities. And then there's racial profiling. Research shows that police disproportionately stop and search Black and Latino drivers, even though contraband is often found at similar or lower rates compared to searches of white drivers. And then let's not forget the wrongful convictions, the exonerations. Wrongful convictions are enormously higher than it is for white people in this country. And also the number of people who are exonerated for murders in the Black community, that number is higher. They're exonerated. So just getting the crime stats and putting them up there is disingenuous, because if you actually look at, those are like people who've been convicted of crimes. Okay. Because crime reporting, we know that that is really not that reliable, but look at the exonerations and look at the racism that is built into the criminal justice system.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, listen, I spent, 2 decades in Washington, D.C., policing predominantly Black communities of color. And I saw how, proactive units like mine were deployed. I mean, obviously off the premise that, we were targeting areas that were experiencing high levels of violent crime. But the level of over policing was rampant, specifically, with tactics like pretextual stops, or, what's commonly referred to as stop and frisk. And this idea that, essentially you're putting, groups of police officers out into communities like what we're seeing right now in the way that federal agents are being deployed in cities throughout the country. They're not conducting investigations. They're not surgically removing violent criminals from our streets. They're going out and they're casting a wide net, and they're hoping that, out of 50, 60, 70, 100 people they stop every night, that 1 or 2 of those people will be, committing some type of a criminal offense. And so in taking 1 or 2 criminals off the street, they are alienating an entire community, because they're stopping people for simply being in that community at that time, for no other reason than being there. And then you're eroding the relationship between law enforcement. And that's that's the problem, is people have lost sight of what is the purpose of a police department. A police department is there to protect and serve the community, the residents of that community. And no one has lost sight of that more than the police departments and the police officers themselves. I mean, I'm not sitting here, talking down to my former colleagues. I'm talking to them as one of them who experienced things like implicit bias throughout my career, who, at times felt, very difficult, have a difficult time empathizing with the people that, that I was entrusted to protect and serve. Now having, been a part of conversations like you were having earlier, you in particular, Don, was a big part of my evolution post, policing career. I've had the opportunity to get out of the police echo chamber and see things from a very different perspective. And that's what I encourage, police officers to listen to these types of conversations, put away your ego, not think about, you're being attacked, but the institution that you're a part of is not living up to and not fulfilling its responsibilities in these communities.
What do you say to people like Megyn Kelly and Glenn Greenwald?
I mean, they're disgusting.
Or Matt Walsh,
they're just they're like the shock jocks of the right. They're there to, play on people's reptile brains and their most basic reaction to, visceral reaction to these things. I mean, they're playing the same game that they accuse someone like you of, the idea of race baiting. Nobody race baits more than Megyn Kelly and these other folks, and having these, conversations that do nothing but stoke division and I believe advocate for violence.
Yeah. Michael Fanone, thank you, sir. I'll see you soon.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Michael Fanone, a good guy and a good friend. So here is time for my sake. Grab your coffee cups, everybody. Get close to your phone or your TV or your computer or whatever it is you're watching. Or turn the volume up, okay? Because I'm waiting. I'm just waiting to see Megyn Kelly, Glenn Greenwald, Matt Walsh, who else I don't know who else. There's a lot of right-wing trolls that you can, and people who don't have to rely on facts in this whole new streaming world that we're in, to have an honest conversation about what the FBI stats show as it relates to political violence and domestic terror in this country and who commits it, who commits it more often, without deflecting to Black people, which is what you're doing. And then it is the definition of racist and you can't even see it. You get upset about that. But when are you having those conversations? The whole point of what I was saying is that I hear you talking about Black people all the time. I hear you talking about Latino people all the time and how people are criminals and who's committing crime. And it's never white people. It's never white men. It's never what the stats show. Do we have issues that we need to solve in different communities? Absolutely. But that's not what I was talking about. So why do you have to deflect? And what is it when they say a hit dog will holler? And that's why I say Megyn Kelly and Glenn Greenwald, they don't want to talk about political violence, because if they did, they would have to face the truth of much of what we talked about today. The greatest threat of political violence in America today is white men radicalized to the right. That is fact. But they never want to have that conversation. Instead, they change the subject. They redirect. They take a question about insurrections, mass shootings, and terrorism, and they turn it into a debate about what? About crime overall. Because you have to deflect it somewhere. I mean, you got to keep your base. You got to fire them up. You can't tell them the truth. Which is, so indicative of what happens with MAGA right now. And why? So that they can recycle the same old racist talking points that Black men are the real problem. It is the laziest pivot in American media. You don't like what I have to say? Too fucking bad. Too bad. So I don't care. You say, oh my gosh, Don Lemon, it's not serious. I don't care. If you don't care about me, you don't think I'm serious, if you think I'm irrelevant, then why the fuck are you talking about me? You are contradicting everything that you are saying. I'm not even on social media like that. I'm not on Twitter. I don't know. I hear from people, oh my God, you're trending. People talking about your Twitter. I don't even know. I'm just walking around living my life and trying to give my subscribers something useful and factual so that they can learn and go about their day, because they're getting so much misinformation from people like you. And let's not forget, okay, Megyn Kelly, I know you. Let's not forget who Megyn Kelly is. The Black Santa and Black Jesus of it all. Megyn Kelly that we're talking about right now, the woman who once went on television to ask, what is so racist about blackface? Are you out of your fucking mind? What is so racist about blackface? If you don't know, then what does that say about you? And then afterwards, went around, I'm not racist, I've learned, or whatever. No, you prove every single time that you attack Black people, you attack someone like me, you attack someone like Joy Reid, that you are, in fact, what people say about you. Megyn Kelly has a history of minimizing racism, of downplaying what Black people live with every single day. That is her record. And now she wants to stand in judgment about who causes violence in this country. Spare me. Get the fuck out of here. Spare me, Megyn Kelly. And Glenn Greenwald, okay? I hope you're listening, all right? Because okay. And this is for Glenn Greenwald drags my husband into this like my marriage somehow invalidates what I'm saying. I don't understand that logic at all. That somehow invalidates what I'm saying? What does that have to really do with anything? It has nothing to do with anything. It is a cheap distraction. It's not analysis, Glenn. It's projection. So I need you, Glenn, to save your psychoanalysis for you and your therapist. Remember, I'm not the one out here in a miniskirt licking the floor. Okay? That's all I'll say to that. So save your psychoanalysis for you and your therapist. And while you're at it, take Megyn Kelly with you. She and her husband could both use it. And for all of you people who are out here saying, oh, well, Don is married to a white. Yeah, I'm married to a white man. It's no secret. So, you know, it's all over. The New York Times, I got married. It's People magazine. It's all over. I talk about my husband. He's on the show. It's not, my husband understands what I'm talking about. He understands what I'm saying. He's not one of those people. He's not out here committing political violence. He's not aggrieved. He's not out here being someone who has had every opportunity and then complains every single day about why he's not getting ahead. Because as a matter of fact, he didn't grow up with every single opportunity, and he is extremely successful and not aggrieved. So he understands that I am not talking about him. But as I say, a hit dog will holler. Racists are gonna racist. Now here, so, and all of you people out there, oh, by the way, let me just, since you're talking about my husband, some of the things are like, oh my God, Tim said, I can't believe some of the things that they're saying about, you know, what happens in the bedroom and all of that. You guys, especially you white guys, you're obsessed with gay sex. You're obsessed with penises. You are obsessed. You talk about gay sex and penises and things more than my gay friends. What is up with that? Especially the MAGA right, especially the right-wing dudes are so thirsty for gay shit and to talk about gay people. And I mean, come on, Grindr, even during the Charlie Kirk thing, Grindr like on fire, lit up. So save your psychoanalysis. Stop talking about what people do in the bedroom. You're obsessed. My gay friends don't even think about that. But you do. What's up with that? And why are so many of you lately been accused of crimes against children and all of these SAs? Like they just keep running across the news, like this MAGA candidate, this whatever, this accused of this, accused of young children, accused. It's like what, accused of having child. Do you know what on there? Like what is going on with you? So here's what the Glenn Greenwalds and the Megyn Kellys of the world and the Matt Walshes and the what's his name again? Oh, and Benny Johnson, Benny. The streets have been talking a long time about you. So you need to zip it when it comes to the LGBTQ gay stuff, because, you know, Benny. Now put that soundbite on your show, or put that soundbite out on Twitter about how the rumors, and look, you know, hey, look at my friend Jen Welch over at the I've Had It. Go look that up. If you don't know how target marketing works, you're upset because you are getting gay vacation ads on your feed. You know how that works? They just don't pop up out of nowhere. It's on your algorithm because, hey, I'm just saying. So here's what, so check yourself and choose wisely the next time my name comes out of your mouth, because I am not here to play. Not anymore. I don't have to worry about a company or a brand. I will light your ass up. Okay, Glenn Greenwald, skirt wearer, liquor of spit. Now, here's what they will never admit. Political violence is not the same as everyday crime. Nobody mistakes a robbery for a racially motivated massacre. Nobody mistakes a mugging for an insurrection. The only collapse the categories that they do so is because they collapse these categories because they never want to face what the actual data shows. They don't want to face it. And the data is crystal clear. The overwhelming face of political violence and domestic terrorism in America today is white men radicalized to the right. That's what the FBI says. That's what the Department of Homeland Security says. That's what case after case, tragedy after tragedy shows us. But Kelly and Greenwald, they don't want to talk about that. They never do. They only show up to dismiss it, to redirect the blame, and then smear people like me and Joy Reid when we say it out loud, because you are not used to people saying it out loud. And you say, I am not on the left. You say, oh, people on the left and liberals. I'm not a liberal. I'm not a liberal, and I'm not a conservative. I'm an individual. I'm an independent. So if you want to categorize me as that, but you're not used to people speaking truth like that in these spaces, get used to it, because we are here. Because it was never about facts for you. This was never about safety. This is about protecting your own, protecting the image of white men by scapegoating black men. And I'm not going to have it. Protecting a movement that you know is violent by pretending all violence is the same. It's not. That's not journalism. That's cover. That's propaganda. So let's be just real plain right now. When you use your platform to erase white male radicalization, when you twist statistics to blame black men, when you protect power instead of exposing it, you are not just part of the problem, you're the accelerant. Megyn Kelly and Glenn Greenwald are not neutral. They are not serious. They are not honest. They are mouthpieces for a lie. And the lie is deadly. So keep talking, and I will too. But the next time you say something about me, whatever it is, whatever your choice is, choose wisely. Turn the TV off. Thanks everyone for watching. Your support means the world to us. So make sure you hit the like button and you subscribe to our channel to make sure that you never ever miss a video. We're live every day, 10 a.m. Eastern time. We drop even more content at 2 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Eastern. And if you want more Don Lemon Show content, we'd love for you to become a member of the Lemon community, where you will receive access to special community posts. You'll get exclusive content and members-only live shows. So head over to our channel page or click the join button on this video. Again, thank you for watching. We appreciate your love and your support.